You know, last week we heard the gospel where Jesus kind of reveals himself to Peter. He says to Peter, "Who am I? Who do you say that I am, Peter?" And what does Peter say? "You are the Messiah, the Son of God." And at that moment, everybody gets excited because now we know for sure who the Messiah is. That Jesus was not just somebody who came to earth, who did some really cool miracles and did some exorcisms and healed some people and really gave some great sermons. But he was in fact the Messiah, the King. And once and for all, the Romans were going to be defeated and the Hebrews would be back to their place of authority, and thank God the King is here. Things are going to get great. And then today, things change. Because there's a change that takes place. Jesus is no longer talking in parables. He's not giving parallel stories. The miracles are not as frequent. The exorcisms are not as often. But now he begins to talk about what is going to happen now. And he says to Peter and those around him, "I am going to be rejected. I'm going to be rejected by the political leaders. I'm going to be rejected by the religious leaders. And I'm going to die. But I'm going to be resurrected." And Peter, who's just heard that and realized who Jesus is as the Messiah, says, "Jesus, that is crazy. You're the Messiah. You're the King. This can't happen." And Jesus says to Peter, "Get behind me, you accuser. You don't even know. You, Peter, one of my closest friends, you've walked with me, you've eaten with me, you've preached with me, you've been with me side by side, yet you don't get it." And friends, I would suggest to you this morning that it was at that moment when the passion began. Because it was at that moment that Jesus realized that he was alone. Because the people who he loved the most, the people who loved him the most, did not understand the suffering that was going to come. See, we oftentimes are like Peter. We want Jesus to be this glorious king who rules, who gets everything right so we can have it our way. Instead of realizing that the divinity of Christ is also in the suffering of Christ, that he suffered for us. Sometimes it seems like our perception is not reality. You know, you hear that phrase, your perception is your reality. Not so much. Your perception is not always your reality. There's a great story. It says it's true. It's probably not. But it's a good story. And it's reported as an actual transcript of a conversation between a United States Navy ship and the Canadian authorities. Now, Canada was robbed a lot this week in the Olympics. So I'm going to give my shout out to Canada. This is from Naval Operations released by the United States Navy, October 10th, 1995. It goes like this. American radioman, please divert your course 15 degrees to the north to avoid a collision. A couple seconds go by. The radio crackles from the Canadians. Recommend you divert your course 15 degrees to the south to avoid a collision. Well, at this time, the captain of the ship isn't very happy and grabs the radio from the radioman and says, "This is the captain of the United States Naval warship. I say again, divert your course." Canadians reply, "No, I say again, you divert your course." This is the United States warship, aircraft carrier, Abraham Lincoln, the second largest ship in the United States Naval Fleet. We are accompanied by 3 destroyers, 4 cruisers, and numerous support vessels. I order and demand that you change your course 15 degrees north. That's 15 degrees north, or countermeasures will be launched. A couple seconds go by. Soft voice picks up the mic and says, "This is the Canadian Lighthouse. Your call." Sometimes our perception of how things are isn't how they really are. And Jesus Christ, we want to perceive Jesus as being the king that we want him to be, but we don't want to realize that there's suffering involved. And we are the same way in our faith. We want to be the kind of Christians that don't have to suffer. We want to be Christian in name only. We want to be Christian because it's the right thing to do. We want to be spectators of this thing called Christianity, but when it's time to suffer, we run. And we leave Jesus alone. And Jesus wants us to love. He wants us to understand what love is, and he showed us that love, and we strive to be what Jesus wants us to be. What does Jesus want us to do? Jesus is telling us to go. Go love. But we're afraid. We're afraid of what it might cost us. Peter, the very person who was with Christ, who Christ rebuked, denied who Jesus even was after his arrest. Do you know who Jesus is? And Peter says, "No, I don't know who Jesus is." "Well, yeah, wait, weren't you with Jesus?" No, that wasn't me. And then it was on Peter that Jesus says, "Upon you, Peter, I'm going to build my church." And this person changes from this relationship of denying who Jesus was to being martyred and crucified upside down because he wasn't even worthy to die the way Jesus did. That's suffering. That's sacrifice. And unfortunately for us, sin is in the world, and we allow sin to rule us and to control our faith. I once heard a priest say that sin is really about one thing. It's about the I in the middle. It's about what we want. We don't love because we want to do things our way. We don't serve because we want to do things our way. And the fact of the matter is that we do a lot of things for I. And for a moment, I want you to picture that Jesus is on the cross. He's bleeding, and he's suffering, and he's alone with nobody but his mother and John, and he's saying, "I love you." He's struggling to breathe. He says, "I love you." And we look back at him, and we say, "I like you too. I love you. But I can't spend an hour with you, Jesus, once a week. It's too much. I have too many things to do. I love you. I know you do, Jesus, but I can't really help that person who is on the street because they smell, and I don't want to get involved in all that. I got too many things to do, Jesus. But I love you." "Well, I know you do, Jesus, but you got to understand that I work really hard, and I've got to go do these things as my mental health break. I can't go to church when I'm on vacation." "But I love you." "I know you do, Jesus, but there's just so many things that I just got to do, and, I've done this and I've done that, and I love you." And I wonder, when was the last time that we ever stood here, looked at the cross, in our brokenness, in our sin, and said, "Jesus, I love you." As we come face to face with him in his body and blood at the altar, and we accept him and we walk, do we do it because we love him, or is it because that's just what we do? This is not a time when the host is given to our hand and we say thank you. It's not a thank you. It's an I love you. Jesus gave himself in every possible way. He suffered. And taking up our cross means that whatever it costs us, we are willing to walk with him because he gave so much to us. I know, you're thinking, wow, he is beating us up this morning. I'm not, because here's the thing. I'm as broken and I've messed up as much as you have, maybe even more. But here's the good news, is that while he's saying, I love you, his grace endures forever. And his love is that great, that even in our failures, he's still saying, I love you. And when we hurt him and we leave him alone, he's still saying, I love you. I love you. I love you. And when we turn away from him and we reject him, I love you. That is what Lent is about. Lent is about changing our hearts and to hear the message of Christ's love in our hearts and in our minds and in our souls, to know that Jesus is suffering because he loves us. And whatever we give for him, whatever it costs us, whatever we do for him is not a sacrifice on our part, because he loves us so much more. Part of the illustration with the children this morning was for you. We give Jesus some of what we have. Jesus gives us all of himself and so much more. He gives us the 3 dozen donuts, and we give him a Timbit. And we're so proud of ourselves. But Jesus, I gave you a Timbit. And I gave you everything. And as his heart stopped and he breathed his last, he said to his Father, it is finished. You don't have to live in fear. You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be afraid of darkness. You don't have to be afraid of death. You don't have to be afraid of sin, because there's a plan of redemption for you, and his name is Jesus Christ, who bled and died so that we could live. So I'm done. I usually don't preach this long. But I have a challenge for you. I double dog dare you. When you come up this morning for communion, and maybe you get right about here, the very place where baptismal vows are made, I double dare you to look at the cross, and you don't have to say it loud. You could whisper it. If you've got some courage, you could say it plainly, and just say, I love you. I love you, Jesus. And then receive him, and receive the life that endures forever. And so when we suffer with him through Lent, we suffer through the times in our lives, know that we are not alone, because somebody who is greater than us has gone before us, and his mercy and his love is eternal. He loves you.